Have you ever wondered what happens when those sworn to uphold the law become the criminals? Imagine police lights flashing in your rearview mirror, but instead of safety, you feel fear. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of an FBI director and the 12 hours of hell that exposed an entire city's corruption network. In this video, you'll witness David Reynolds fight against a corrupt network stretching from street cops to the mayor himself. When his family is arrested on fabricated charges and his life threatened, Reynolds must battle not only to save his loved ones, but to expose the dark truth behind the badge. Is the price of justice worth paying? Let's find out. If this is your first time visiting our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our powerful, true stories of corruption fights and justice seekers. Each video is an incredible journey uncovering truths that few dare to speak. Join our community of truth seekers today. The desert highway stretched before David Reynolds like a black ribbon under the Texas stars, his silver sedan cutting through the darkness at a steady 55 miles per hour. His FBI badge rested heavy in his suit pocket, a cold comfort after 20 years of service that had taken him from a beat cop in Chicago to the director of the Houston FBI branch. The digital clock on his dashboard read 10:42 p.m., the air outside still a suffocating 94 degrees Fahrenheit despite the sun having set hours ago. He was just 30 miles outside El Paso, heading home after shutting down a human trafficking operation that spanned from Mexico to Louisiana. Reynolds adjusted his tie, a navy blue number against his crisp white shirt, and allowed himself to think about the weekend ahead. First one in 4 months, maybe fire up the grill, crack open a cold Shiner Bock, watch the Astros game. That's when the flash of red and blue lights stabbed through his rearview mirror. Reynolds felt his stomach tighten, that familiar dread washing over him. Not again. Not tonight. He'd been driving exactly at the speed limit, using his turn signals, everything by the book, because he'd learned long ago that for a black man on a deserted highway, following the rules to the letter wasn't a choice. It was survival. He eased the sedan onto the gravel shoulder, dust billowing in the headlights. The engine silenced, the radio fading to static as he placed his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, visible and still. Hey folks, before we dive deeper into what happens next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe in standing up against injustice, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The silhouette approaching from the patrol car was tall and lean, moving with a swagger that spoke of authority unchecked. Officer Scott Miller, badge number 4387, stepped into view, his hand already resting on his holster, his face a mask of contempt before he'd even reached the window. What David Reynolds didn't know, couldn't know, was that this routine traffic stop was about to ignite a 12-hour nightmare that would test every ounce of his training, expose a web of corruption stretching from the streets to City Hall, and force him to choose between justice and the family he loved more than anything. This is the story of how one man's drive home became a fight for his life, his freedom, and the very badge he'd sworn to honor. A story that asks, how far would you go when the system designed to protect and serve becomes the very thing you need protection from? Buckle up, because this ride is about to get dangerous. Highway 62 stretched empty in both directions, the kind of desolate that makes a man feel like the last person on earth. Reynolds could see nothing but scrubby creosote bushes and the occasional prickly pear cactus clawing at the parched earth. The Chihuahuan desert was unforgiving at night, temperatures still hovering around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the air so dry it seemed to steal the moisture from your lungs with each breath. Officer Miller approached, flashlight beamed deliberately, aimed to blind. He was mid-40s, with skin reddened from years under the Texas sun, and a jaw that looked like it had never known a smile. "License and registration," Miller barked, not even bothering with a greeting. His right hand remained unnervingly close to his weapon, his stance wide and confrontational. Reynolds kept his voice steady, professional. "Evening, officer. May I ask why I've been pulled over?" Miller's flashlight beam steadied on Reynolds' face, studying his features with unconcealed disdain. "You people always want explanations, don't you? How about you just do what you're told?" The words landed like a slap. Reynolds had heard "you people" too many times in his life not to recognize the weight behind it. Still, he reached slowly for the glove compartment. "I'm going to get my registration now, officer," he narrated, movements deliberate. "And my license is in my wallet. I'm reaching for it next." "Just hurry it up," Miller snapped, knuckles whitening around his flashlight. As Reynolds handed over his license, he added, "I should inform you that I'm a federal officer. FBI. My credentials are in my jacket pocket." Miller's face twisted into something ugly. "FBI? Right. And I'm the damn governor of Texas." Without even glancing at the license, he flicked it onto the ground outside the car, where it landed in the dust. "Step out of the vehicle. Now." "Officer, I haven't violated any traffic laws. I was." The conversation ended with Miller's fist slamming onto the hood of Reynolds' sedan, leaving a dent the size of a grapefruit in the metal. "Out. Now." Heart hammering but face calm, Reynolds complied, stepping carefully from the car, hands visible. At 6 feet 2 inches, he was taller than Miller, which seemed to irritate the officer further. "Hands on the vehicle, legs spread," Miller ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Reynolds complied, feeling the heat of the car's metal through his palms. In the distance, headlights appeared, another patrol car approaching fast. "What's going on here, Scott?" The second officer, Tom Parker, climbed out of his cruiser. Shorter, stockier, with a military-style crew cut and mirrored sunglasses despite the darkness. "Got a wise guy claims he's FBI," Miller answered, patting Reynolds down with unnecessary roughness. "Probably just another drug runner." Parker circled closer, evaluating Reynolds with cold calculation. "Doesn't look like FBI to me." "My badge is in my inner jacket pocket," Reynolds stated calmly. "You're making a serious mistake, officers." Miller responded by yanking Reynolds' arms behind his back and slapping handcuffs on so tight the metal bit into his skin. A thin trickle of blood ran down his wrist, staining his white shirt cuff. "Check my credentials," Reynolds insisted, wincing as the cuffs cut deeper. "Call it in. Verify my identity." "Shut up," Parker snapped, stepping close enough that Reynolds could smell the coffee on his breath. "You know what your problem is. You think that fancy suit makes you special." With shocking speed, Parker's nightstick appeared in his hand, jabbing hard into Reynolds' ribs. The pain exploded like fire, stealing his breath as he doubled over. "Not so special now, are you?" Miller laughed, watching Reynolds struggle to straighten up. Through the haze of pain, Reynolds realized this wasn't a traffic stop gone wrong. This was deliberate, targeted. These officers knew exactly who they were pulling over. "You're digging your own graves," Reynolds managed, blood from his wrists now dripping onto the gravel below. Miller leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "No, Mr. FBI man. We're digging yours." As they shoved him toward the patrol car, Reynolds caught sight of a phone in Parker's hand, recording video. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just a beating, it was a setup. What do you think, folks? Should Reynolds have kept his FBI status to himself? Comment number 1 if you think he was right to identify himself, or number 2 if you think it just made things worse. And if you're feeling the tension building, hit that like button because this situation is about to explode in ways no one could predict. The back seat of Miller's patrol car was a cage of vinyl and despair, the air conditioning barely functioning in the 85 degrees Fahrenheit night. Reynolds sat hunched forward, trying to minimize the pressure on his bleeding wrists. The cruiser rumbled along an unmarked dirt road, far from the highway where this nightmare had begun. With each jolt of the suspension, pain lanced through his ribs where Parker's nightstick had connected. But Reynolds' mind remained sharp, cataloging every turn, every landmark they passed. 20 years in the FBI had taught him to stay calm in the worst situations, and this was rapidly becoming one of the worst. Miller and Parker sat in the front seats, voices low but audible. "Warren's gonna love this," Parker chuckled, scrolling through something on his phone. "Uppity Fed thinking he owns our roads." Miller grunted agreement. "Make sure you edit that footage before uploading. Cut out everything before he stepped out of the car." Reynolds shifted slightly, feeling for the small emergency transmitter hidden in the lining of his suit jacket. Standard issue for high-ranking FBI officials after a division chief had been kidnapped 3 years ago. His captors hadn't found it during their pat-down, a critical mistake. Wincing through the pain, he pressed the tiny activation button 3 times. The silent SOS would ping Deputy Director Chen's secure line with GPS coordinates and a distress signal. "You know," Reynolds said, voice steady despite everything, "there are easier ways to throw away your careers." Miller's eyes met his in the rearview mirror, cold and flat as stones. "Shut your mouth unless you want more trouble than you've already got." 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The cruiser jolted down increasingly remote roads, deeper into the desert wilderness. Reynolds' hope began to falter until he heard it, the distant thrum of helicopter blades slicing through the night sky. Miller heard it too, his head snapping up. "What the?" The helicopter appeared suddenly, powerful spotlight pinning the cruiser in a circle of blinding white. The voice that boomed from the loudspeaker was crisp, authoritative. "Attention officers in vehicle. This is the FBI. Stop your vehicle and release Deputy Director Reynolds immediately." Parker cursed, the cruiser fishtailing as Miller slammed the brakes. "How the hell did they? Did you really think I came alone?" Reynolds said, allowing himself a small smile despite the pain. The next few minutes unfolded in a blur, FBI tactical officers rappelling from a helicopter, weapons drawn. Miller and Parker forced to the ground, the blessed relief as someone cut the too tight handcuffs from Reynolds' bloody wrists. "You okay, sir?" Special Agent Diaz helped Reynolds to his feet, eyes widening at the blood staining his shirt. "I'll live," Reynolds answered grimly. "Those two were taking me somewhere quiet. This wasn't random, Maria. Someone sent them." Back in his own vehicle, with FBI escort, Reynolds headed toward Houston, his mind racing to connect the dots. Why tonight? Why that stretch of highway? And who had enough pull to send police officers on such a blatantly illegal mission? The answer began to emerge just 50 miles later, when his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Chun. Check social media. It's bad. At a gas station off Interstate 10, Reynolds watched in disbelief as the video loaded on his phone. There he was on the side of Highway 62, but the footage began with him exiting his car, edited to make it appear aggressive. Worse, someone had dubbed an audio, his voice, clearly synthesized, shouting, "I'll kill you, pig," followed by what looked like him lunging at Miller. The caption read, "FBI thug attacks officer. Who's the real criminal?" The video had already garnered 85,000 views and climbing, the comments section a cesspool of racist vitriol. Typical. Give them a badge and they think they own us. Should have finished the job. Reynolds' hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. This wasn't just character assassination. It was a deliberate attempt to turn public opinion against him, to justify whatever might happen next. His phone rang, Chin again. "David, this is bigger than we thought. That video's being amplified by bots, and it's hitting every right-wing forum in Texas. Someone with resources is behind this." "I need to get home," Reynolds said, thinking of his wife Melissa and their son Jason. They might be targets too. "We're sending a team to your house now," Chin assured him. "But David, be careful. Whoever's doing this has obviously been planning it." Reynolds had just pulled back onto the interstate when he spotted them. 3 pickup trucks, Confederate flags flapping from their beds, closing in fast from behind. No coincidence. No way. "Chun," he said tersely into the phone, "I've got company. 3 vehicles, coordinated movement. These aren't random road rage idiots." "Location," Chun demanded. "Highway 10, mile marker 734. Tell your chopper to." The first brick smashed through his rear window, glass exploding inward. Reynolds swerved, fighting to keep control as a voice bellowed from the lead truck, "Pull over, Fed boy. We're gonna finish what Miller started." Reynolds floored it, the sedan's engine screaming as it hit 90 miles per hour. But the truck stayed with him, clearly modified for pursuit. "How did they know where to find me?" he muttered, then realized with cold clarity. They were being directed. Someone was tracking his movements in real time. The same someone who had orchestrated the traffic stop. The same someone who had prepared the doctored video in advance. This wasn't a traffic stop gone wrong. This was an execution. What do you think, folks? Will Reynolds outrun these trucks, or is this just the beginning of his nightmare? Hit that like button if you're on the edge of your seat, and subscribe if you want to see what happens when a man with nothing to lose fights back against a corrupt system. The rural bridge loomed ahead, a narrow 2-lane crossing spanning a dry riverbed 50 feet below. Reynolds' knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as his sedan hit 95 miles per hour, the engine protesting with each additional demand for speed. The 3 pickup trucks remained in pursuit, their modified engines allowing them to match his pace despite his FBI-issue vehicle's capabilities. "Chun, I'm approaching Coyote Creek Bridge," Reynolds shouted into his phone, now on speaker. "These guys are coordinated, professional, not just angry locals." "Tactical team is still 18 minutes out," Chen's voice crackled back. "Highway patrol's been alerted, but they might be in on it too," Reynolds finished grimly. "Got it." He scanned the road ahead, calculating options. The bridge offered both danger and opportunity. Its narrow passage would force his pursuers to line up single file, potentially giving him a chance to create distance once across. The lead pickup suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside Reynolds' left. The driver, A burly man with a shaved head and neck tattoos grinned through the window before deliberately swerving toward the sedan. Metal screamed against metal as Reynolds fought the wheel, his car scraping along the bridge's guardrail, sparks flying in the darkness. The impact sent pain shooting through his already injured ribs, but he maintained control, pressing the accelerator to the floor. That's when he spotted the second pickup swinging wide to his right, boxing him in. The third remained directly behind, headlights blinding in his mirrors. "They're trying to pin me," Reynolds shouted, but Chen's response was lost as something heavy smashed through his side window. A brick tumbled onto the passenger seat, followed by an explosion of glass shards. One sliced across Reynolds' cheek, sending warm blood trickling down his neck. Another embedded itself in his shoulder, a hot needle of pain that made his left arm momentarily numb. "Get out of the car, Fed," a voice bellowed from a right pickup, "or we'll run you right off this bridge." Reynolds' training kicked in. If he stopped, he was dead. If he slowed down, he was dead. His only chance was to break through their formation. He slammed on the brakes. The sudden deceleration caught his pursuers off guard. The truck behind him swerved desperately, clipping his rear bumper before spinning into the guardrail. The one on his right shot past, unable to adjust in time. Reynolds cranked the wheel hard left, then accelerated into the newly created gap, his tires screaming on the asphalt. For a moment, he thought he'd made it. Then came the sickening crunch of impact as the lead pickup rammed him from behind. The sedan fishtailed wildly, back and swinging toward the edge of the bridge. Reynolds fought the wheel, but physics was against him. The guardrail gave way with a metallic shriek, and suddenly there was nothing but air beneath his right wheels. Time slowed. The sedan teetered on the edge, gravity pulling hungrily at the chassis. Reynolds threw his weight left, as if his 185 pounds could counterbalance 2 tons of metal. For one miraculous second, it seemed to work, then the pickup rammed him again. The sedan plunged over the side. It wasn't a straight drop. The embankment sloped at first, the car bouncing violently down the incline before becoming airborne. Reynolds' world tumbled in a kaleidoscope of stars and darkness as the vehicle rolled once, twice, before landing upside down in the sandy riverbed below. The airbag exploded into his face, the seatbelt cutting into his chest as he hung suspended, blood rushing to his head. The engine hissed and sputtered, then died. In the sudden silence, Reynolds could hear laughter and whoops from the bridge above, flashlight beams beginning to probe down the embankment. "They're coming to finish the job," he thought hazily, fighting to stay conscious. His left arm wouldn't respond properly, and something warm and wet was coating his right leg. More blood from a gash where metal had buckled inward. He fumbled for the seatbelt release, crashing painfully to the roof of the inverted car when it gave way. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his body, but he forced himself to move, crawling toward the shattered windshield. A voice crackled to life, not his phone, which lay smashed somewhere in the wreckage, but a CB radio from one of the pickups above. "This is Miller. What's the status?" Reynolds froze, listening intently. "He went off the bridge at Coyote Creek," came the reply from one of his pursuers. "Cars totaled. We're going down to check if he survived." Miller's voice oozed satisfaction. "Make sure he doesn't. No witnesses, no loose ends. Warren wants this cleaned up." Warren. The name registered dimly in Reynolds' pain-fogged brain. Mayor Richard Warren? The connection made a terrible kind of sense. He'd been investigating corruption in border control, and Warren's name had surfaced multiple times, though always carefully insulated from direct evidence. Flashlight beams grew closer as Reynolds dragged himself fully from the wreckage. His service weapon was still holstered under his jacket. Somehow, his attackers hadn't taken it during the initial traffic stop. Small mercies. He pulled himself behind a large boulder as the first of the pickup drivers skidded down an embankment. "Holy shit, no way he survived that," one voice called out. "Check the car anyway," another responded. Miller said no loose ends. Reynolds steadied his breathing, clearing his mind despite the pain. 3 attackers, all likely armed, his left arm functioning at maybe 60%. Multiple injuries affecting his mobility. Not great odds. But David Reynolds hadn't become FBI Deputy Director by giving up when the odds turned against him. He waited until the first man reached the car, watching as the attacker bent to peer through the shattered windshield. In one fluid motion, Reynolds raised his weapon and fired, one shot center mass. The man dropped without a sound. The others reacted instantly, diving for cover and returning fire. Bullets pinged off the boulder and kicked up sand around Reynolds as he pressed himself flatter against the earth. "He's alive," one shouted. "Circle around. Flush him out." Reynolds checked his magazine. Full, minus the 1 round fired. He had one chance at this, and it would require perfect timing. What happened next would determine not just his survival, but whether the truth about what was happening in El Paso would ever come to light. What do you think, folks? Will Reynolds make it out of this deadly ambush? Comment below with your predictions, and hit that like button if you're rooting for him to survive against these corrupt attackers. Blood seeped through Reynolds' shirt as he pressed himself against the boulder, the sound of his attackers' footsteps crunching on the sandy riverbed. His FBI training kicked into overdrive, assessing threats, calculating angles, mapping escape routes. 2 armed men remained, attempting to flank his position from opposite sides. Miller wants proof he's dead, one called to the other. Photos for Warren. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Mayor Warren was clearly orchestrating this whole operation, with Officer Miller as his attack dog. This wasn't random harassment. It was an assassination designed to look like a tragic accident or, failing that, a confrontation with local patriots. Reynolds waited until the footsteps approached from his right, then fired twice in rapid succession toward the sound. A cry of pain confirmed at least one hit. He immediately rolled left, narrowly avoiding the retaliatory shots that chipped fragments from the boulder where his head had been seconds before. The remaining attacker was moving more cautiously now, using the wrecked sedan for cover. Reynolds needed to end this quickly. His injuries were severe, and the blood loss was beginning to make him lightheaded. He spotted the attacker's shadow stretching across the sand, illuminated by the pickup's headlights from above. With painful precision, Reynolds aimed at the man's legs visible beneath the car and fired. The attacker screamed, collapsing into view. Reynolds was on him in seconds, kicking away his weapon and pressing his Glock against the man's temple. "Who sent you?" he demanded, voice deadly calm despite his injuries. The man's eyes widened with fear. "Just following orders, man." Miller said it was a Fed gone rogue. "And Warren, what's his role?" The attacker's surprise confirmed Reynolds' suspicion. "How do you?" "Answer me." Reynolds increased the pressure of the gun. "Warren runs everything. The drugs, the cops, the judges. Miller's just his enforcer." Reynolds' mind raced. If Warren controlled the local police, the precinct wasn't safe. If he controlled the judges, no warrant or court order could be trusted. His options were narrowing by the second. He zip-tied the attacker to the car frame using restraints from his jacket pocket, standard FBI equipment, and began the painful climb up the embankment. Each step sent fire through his injured leg, his left arm still weak from the glass embedded in his shoulder. But the alternative was waiting for Miller to send reinforcements, which would surely arrive soon. At the top, he found one pickup still running, keys in the ignition. The other attackers must have fled in the remaining vehicles. Small favors. He pulled himself into the driver's seat, grimacing at the Confederate flag decal on the dashboard. The irony wasn't lost on him, escaping in the vehicle of those sent to kill him. He switched on the CB radio, tuning it to the frequency he'd heard Miller using. Units converge on Highway 10 near Coyote Creek Bridge. Suspect is armed and dangerous. Shoot on sight. Repeat, shoot on sight. Reynolds' stomach tightened. Miller was mobilizing every corrupt cop in the county. He needed to warn Melissa and Jason. He grabbed the pickup's built-in phone, a burner untraceable, and dialed his home number with trembling fingers. The phone rang 4 times before his wife's voice answered, thick with sleep. "Hello." "Melissa, listen carefully," Reynolds said urgently. "Take Jason and go to your sister's in Austin. Right now." "David, what's happening?" "It's 2 a.m. "There's no time," he cut her off, hearing the fear in his own voice. "I've been attacked. Corrupt cops working for Mayor Warren. They doctored footage to make me look violent. They'll come for you next." A pause, then the rustling of sheets. Melissa's voice sharpened, fully awake now. "Are you hurt? Do you need an ambulance?" "I can't go to a hospital. Warren controls everything in this county." He winced as he shifted in the seat, fresh blood soaking through his pants. "Get Jason, get out." "I'll." The call cut off abruptly. Reynolds tried redialing, but the line was dead. Whether it was network issues or something more sinister, he couldn't tell. But the sick feeling in his gut intensified. He needed to assume the worst, that Warren's people were already moving on his family. 40 miles away, in their suburban Houston home, Melissa Reynolds stood frozen in her bedroom, the phone's dial tone humming in her ear. Her mind raced through David's warning, processing the urgency in his voice. This wasn't a drill or an overreaction. Her husband of 15 years didn't panic easily. She moved quickly, throwing essential items into a duffel bag. "Jason," she called, heading to her 12-year-old son's room. "Jason, wake up. We need to go." The boy stirred sleepily, comic books scattered across his bed. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Your father's in trouble. We need to leave right now." Before Jason could respond, blinding light flooded the room as multiple vehicles pulled into their driveway, high beams aimed directly at the house. Melissa rushed to the window, heart pounding as she saw 4 police cruisers and a SWAT van disgorging armed officers onto her lawn. "Houston PD. We have a warrant," a voice boomed through a megaphone. Melissa grabbed Jason's hand. "Back door. Now." They made it 3 steps into the hallway before the front door exploded inward, with splintering under the force of a battering ram. Officers in tactical gear swarmed in, weapons raised. "Freeze. Hands where we can see them." Melissa pushed Jason behind her protectively. "This is my home. You have no right." "We have a warrant for this residence in connection with narcotics trafficking." The lead officer cut her off coldly. David Reynolds is using his FBI position as cover for moving product across state lines. That's absurd. Melissa protested as officers roughly separated her from Jason. "My husband is investigating corruption." Her words died as an officer emerged from their bedroom, holding aloft a plastic evidence bag containing what appeared to be cocaine. "Found it, Sergeant. Just where the tip said it would be." The cold realization hit her like a physical blow. They'd been set up. What do you think, folks? Will Melissa and Jason escape this frame job? And can Reynolds reach them in time? Hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready to see how this corrupt system gets exposed. The safe house, set nestled among mesquite trees 40 miles southwest of Houston, its weathered exterior belying the reinforced walls and state-of-the-art security system within. Deputy Director Chun paced the main room, phone pressed to her ear, while medical personnel attended to Reynolds' injuries. "He's lost approximately 20% blood volume," the FBI medic reported, expertly cleaning the glass still embedded in Reynolds' shoulder. 3 broken ribs, moderate concussion, multiple lacerations. "He needs a hospital." "No hospitals," Reynolds insisted through gritted teeth. "Warren's reach is too extensive. We don't know who we can trust." Chin ended her call, her expression grim. "David, it's worse than we thought. Houston PD raided your home 2 hours ago. They're holding Melissa and Jason on drug charges." The room seemed to tilt as Reynolds processed her words. "Drugs? What drugs?" "A pound of cocaine discovered in your bedroom closet." The warrant was signed by Judge Harrison, Warren's former law partner. Reynolds attempted to stand, only to be firmly pushed back by the medic. "We need to get them out." "We're working on it," Chin assured him, "but we're fighting a system that's been corrupted from the inside out." Warren spent years placing his people in key positions: judges, police captains, even the DA's office. Reynolds' mind raced despite the pain clouding his thoughts. "The earpiece," he said suddenly. "I was wearing my emergency earpiece during the traffic stop. Everything Miller and Parker said was transmitted to the secure server." Chen's eyes widened. That could be enough to challenge the narrative they're spinning. "And I got a confession from one of the bridge attackers. He confirmed Warren's running everything, the drugs, the corruption, all of it." For the next several hours, the safe house transformed into a war room. Agents compiled evidence, hacked into traffic cameras, and built a case that could withstand Warren's influence. Reynolds, despite his injuries, remained at the center, directing operations with fierce determination. "Miller's the weak link," he insisted, studying the officer's personnel file. 27 civilian complaints in 9 years, all dismissed. 3 shootings, all ruled justified despite conflicting witness statements. He's Warren's enforcer, but he's gotten sloppy, confident that the system will protect him. By dawn, they had a plan. Chun would lead a tactical team to raid the El Paso precinct where Miller operated, while second teams simultaneously secured evidence from Judge Harrison's chambers. Reynolds, against medical advice, insisted on joining Chen's team. "He tried to kill me," Reynolds said simply. "I want to see his face when we take him down." The raid began at 6:17 a.m., just as the morning shift was arriving at the precinct. FBI helicopters descended from the steel-gray sky, while armored vehicles surrounded the building. The element of surprise was total. Miller and his corrupt officers barely had time to reach for their weapons before being overwhelmed. Reynolds limped through the chaos, his injuries bandaged but still radiating pain with every step. He found Miller in his office, frantically shredding documents. "It's over, Scott," Reynolds said from the doorway, his service weapon aimed steadily despite his injured shoulder. Miller froze, then slowly raised his hands, his expression shifting from shock to calculated calm. "This is a jurisdictional overreach, Reynolds. You have no authority here." "We have your voice on tape ordering my execution," Reynolds replied coolly. "We have witness testimony connecting you to Warren. And as we speak, agents are finding every piece of evidence you failed to destroy." For a moment, Miller's mask slipped, revealing the rage beneath. "You have no idea what you're up against. Warren owns this town, this county. One phone call and your wife and kid will never see daylight again." Reynolds stepped closer, voice dropping dangerously low. "Threaten my family again, and I'll forget I'm FBI." As agents cuffed Miller, Reynolds noticed a familiar face being led from an adjacent office. Officer Parker, his earlier swagger replaced by pale-faced fear. "Parker's singing like a canary," Chin reported, joining Reynolds. "Gave us everything, dates, names, operations. Warren's been running drugs through El Paso for 8 years, using his position as mayor to control who gets investigated and who gets protected." Outside, news vans had already gathered, cameras capturing the parade of officers being led out in handcuffs. Reynolds watched from the precinct steps, a sense of grim satisfaction building as Miller was placed in an FBI transport vehicle. That's when he felt it, a sudden burning sensation as something tore through his already injured shoulder. The crack of the rifle shot reached his ears a split second later. "Sniper!" Chun shouted, tackling Reynolds to the ground as agents scattered for cover, weapons drawn. Blood bloomed across Reynolds' bandages as Chun dragged him behind a concrete pillar. "Get a location," she screamed into her radio, pressing her hand against Reynolds' wound to slow the bleeding. Reynolds' vision swam, the blood loss from his combined injuries reaching critical levels. Through the haze of pain, he saw something flutter down from a nearby rooftop, a piece of paper carried by the morning breeze, landing just feet from where he lay. "Get that," he gasped, pointing with his good arm. Chun retrieved it cautiously, her expression darkening as she read the message scrawled in black ink, "You're next, traitor." As medics rushed to attend to Reynolds, his gaze drifted to the transport vehicle where Miller sat watching. Despite the distance and the vehicle's tinted windows, Reynolds could feel the man's eyes on him, could almost see the smug smile playing across his face. And in that moment, through the pain and blood loss, a chilling clarity washed over him. Miller's words echoed in his mind, "Warren owns this town." This wasn't about one corrupt cop, or even a handful of them. This was about a system so thoroughly corrupted that taking down Miller was like cutting off a single head of a hydra. 2 more would grow in its place. As Reynolds was loaded onto a stretcher, Chun leaned close. "The sniper got away, but we found his position. Military-grade equipment, professional setup. This wasn't some random vigilante. This was a professional hit." Reynolds nodded weakly. "Warren," he managed. "Go higher. Look at his connections, his finances. Miller's just the enforcer. Warren's the mastermind." The helicopter lifted off, carrying Reynolds to a secure medical facility outside Warren's sphere of influence. Below, the El Paso precinct grew smaller, the gathered crowd still watching the aftermath of the raid. But Reynolds knew the real battle was just beginning, because somewhere in that crowd was a set of eyes reporting back to Warren, and the mayor was already planning his next move. What do you think will happen next? Will Reynolds recover in time to protect his family? Comment below with your theories, and hit that like button if you're ready to see Warren finally face justice. 3 weeks later, Reynolds stood at the back of the packed El Paso County Courthouse, his left arm in a sling, a cane supporting his still-healing leg. The sniper's bullet had missed his vital organs by millimeters, adding another scar to his growing collection. His ribs were taped tight beneath his fresh suit, the pain a constant reminder of how close he'd come to death. The courtroom buzzed with tension, every seat filled with spectators and press. At the defense table sat Officer Scott Miller, his prison jumpsuit a stark contrast to the arrogant man who had beaten Reynolds weeks earlier. Beside him, his attorney Ray Carver, a slick, silver-haired man known for representing the county's most notorious criminals, shuffled papers with practiced nonchalance. "You sure you're up for this?" Chun whispered, noting Reynolds' pallor. "I didn't come this far to back down now," he replied, straightening despite the pain. "Melissa and Jason are still in custody. The judge keeps delaying their bail hearing. This is our best chance to force Warren's hand." The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Maria Ortiz entered, one of the few judges in El Paso County with no ties to Warren's network. The FBI had vetted her thoroughly, finding a 20-year record of unimpeachable integrity. If anyone could ensure a fair trial, it was her. "Commonwealth versus Scott Miller," she announced, her voice sharp in the hushed courtroom. "Charges include attempted murder, corruption, civil rights violations, and conspiracy." As the preliminary motions began, Reynolds studied the gallery. Most faces were hostile, Miller's supporters including several off-duty officers. But scattered throughout were ordinary citizens, their expressions hopeful, watching justice unfold. When Reynolds' name was called to testify, a murmur ran through the crowd. He made his way to the stand with deliberate dignity, refusing to let his injuries diminish his presence. Deputy Director Reynolds, Prosecutor Stephanie Williams began, "Please describe for the court what happened on the night of June 18th. For the next 40 minutes, Reynolds recounted every detail. The traffic stop, the assault, the helicopter rescue, the doctored video, the bridge ambush, and finally, the raid on the precinct. His voice remained steady, professional, even when describing the worst moments of brutality. "And why do you believe Officer Miller targeted you specifically?" Williams asked. "Because I was leading an investigation into border corruption that was getting uncomfortably close to Mayor Richard Warren," Reynolds replied, his gaze shifting briefly to Miller, whose jaw clenched visibly. Miller was Warren's enforcer, responsible for silencing witnesses and eliminating threats. Carver's cross-examination was brutal, a calculated attempt to paint Reynolds as arrogant and uncooperative during the traffic stop. "Isn't it true that you refused to comply with Officer Miller's lawful commands?" "I complied with every lawful command," Reynolds countered calmly. "What I refused to do was participate in my own unlawful detention and assault." "The jury only has your word for what happened during that stop," Carver sneered. "Convenient that you claim the dashcam footage was doctored." At Reynolds' nod, Williams played her trump card, the precinct's internal security footage, showing Miller and Parker clearly discussing how to edit the video before uploading it. The courtroom fell silent as Miller's voice filled the room. "Cut everything before he got out of the car. Make it look like he swung first." Carver's face flushed with anger. "Objection. This footage wasn't included in discovery. Because your client ordered it destroyed, Williams countered, producing documentation. Fortunately, FBI forensics recovered it from the precinct's backup server. The most damning evidence came next. Reynolds' earpiece recording capturing every slur, every threat Miller had made during the traffic stop, including the explicit statement, "Warren wants him gone before he testifies." The jury's expressions shifted noticeably. Even Miller's supporters in the gallery began to look uncomfortable as the weight of evidence mounted. On the trial's third day, after barely 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Reynolds stood with Chun at the back of the courtroom, his heart hammering as the foreman read the verdict. On the count of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. A collective gasp rippled through the room. On the count of corruption, guilty. On civil rights violations, guilty. On conspiracy, guilty. Miller's face drained of color as Judge Ortiz sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison. As officers led him away, he locked eyes with Reynolds, mouthing words only Reynolds could see. "This isn't over. Warren will bury you." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, some celebrating the verdict, others protesting what they saw as an FBI overreach. Reynolds navigated through them carefully, Chun and 2 agents forming a protective barrier around him. He was nearly to the FBI vehicle when something hard struck him from behind, a bottle shattering against his injured shoulder. Pain exploded through his already damaged nerves as he stumbled forward. "FBI tyrant," someone shouted from the crowd. "Free Miller." Reynolds turned to face his attacker, only to find himself confronting a wall of hostile faces. These weren't just Miller's friends. This was a community that had been fed lies for years, manipulated by Warren's influence over local media and institutions. As agents rushed him into the vehicle, a courthouse clerk pushed through the crowd, thrusting an envelope into Reynolds' hands before disappearing back into the throng. Inside the safety of the car, Reynolds opened it to find an arrest warrant for him. The charge, evidence tampering. The signature, Judge Michael Harris, Warren's college roommate. "He's not giving up," Reynolds said grimly, passing the warrant to Chun. Miller was just a sacrifice. Warren's still moving pieces on the board. "What's our next move?" Chun asked as the vehicle pulled away from the increasingly volatile crowd. Reynolds stared out at El Paso's skyline, his gaze settling on City Hall where Mayor Warren's office overlooked the city like a castle tower. "We go after the king." "Do you think Reynolds has enough evidence to take down Mayor Warren? Or will the mayor's influence prove too powerful? Drop your predictions in the comments, and hit that like button if you're ready for the final showdown. The mountain roads outside El Paso twisted like a rattlesnake, Reynolds' borrowed FBI sedan hugging each curve at 70 miles per hour. Sunset painted the desert in hues of amber and crimson, temperatures still hovering around 91 degrees Fahrenheit despite the fading day. His destination, the sprawling hacienda of Mayor Richard Warren, perched on an exclusive hillside overlooking the city he'd corrupted for nearly a decade. "This is suicide, David," Chen's voice crackled through the secure car phone. "Warren's mansion is practically a fortress. Private security, ex-military. And you're still recovering from multiple injuries." Reynolds adjusted his sling, wincing as pain shot through his shoulder where the sniper's bullet had torn through muscle and bone 3 weeks earlier. "We tried playing by the rules, Sarah." Miller's conviction should have been enough to pressure Warren into backing down. "Instead, he's doubling down," Chen replied grimly. The arrest warrant for you. The continued detention of Melissa and Jason. Our sources say Judge Harris has already prepared dismissal orders for all charges against Warren if we move on him directly. That's why I'm not moving officially, Reynolds said, his voice hardening. No warrant. No backup. Just me, wearing a wire, getting Warren's confession directly. It's too risky. He'll have you searched. Then we get creative. Reynolds checked his rearview mirror, noting a pair of headlights that had been maintaining the same distance for the past 10 minutes. I think I've picked up a tail. Probably Warren's security doing advanced screening of visitors. All the more reason to abort, Chin urged. We can build our case another way. Reynolds' mind flashed to Melissa and Jason, still in custody, on fabricated charges. Every legal motion for their release had been blocked by Warren's judicial allies. Time was running out. No, we end this tonight. The call disconnected as Reynolds rounded another bend. Ahead, a roadblock materialized, 2 black SUVs positioned across both lanes, men with assault rifles standing ready. Not police. Private security. Reynolds slowed, evaluating his options. The drop-off to his right plunged several hundred feet into rocky terrain. No escape route there. Backing up would only lead to the vehicle tailing him. He was boxed in. He brought the sedan to a stop 50 feet from the roadblock, hands visible on the steering wheel. 4 armed men approached cautiously, their movements betraying military training. Deputy Director Reynolds, the lead guard, called out, "Mayor Warren is expecting you. Please step out of the vehicle." So Warren had anticipated this move. Reynolds wasn't sure if that was an advantage or a fatal miscalculation on his part. The guards conducted a thorough search, relieving him of his service weapon and phone. They missed the wire, however, an experimental FBI prototype embedded in his sling, the transmitter disguised as part of the medical-grade material. "The mayor appreciates your initiative in coming alone," the guard said, directing Reynolds to the lead SUV. "He's been wanting to have a conversation." 20 minutes later, Reynolds was escorted through the imposing entrance of Warren's hacienda. The mansion exuded wealth and power, Spanish colonial architecture blended with modern security features, priceless art adorning walls monitored by discreet cameras. Mayor Richard Warren awaited him in a wood-paneled study, a fire crackling despite the warm evening. At 58, Warren cut an impressive figure, silver-haired, tanned, with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He rose from behind an antique desk as Reynolds entered, dismissing the guards with a casual wave. "Deputy Director Reynolds," Warren greeted him, gesturing to a leather chair. "I admire your boldness. Most men in your position would be halfway across the country by now." Reynolds remained standing. Most men haven't had their families imprisoned on false charges. Warren smiled thinly, pouring amber, liquid from a crystal decanter. "Bourbon? It's Pappy Van Winkle, 23 years old. I didn't come for hospitality." "No," Warren acknowledged, settling back into his chair. "You came hoping to record me making incriminating statements. Wearing a wire, perhaps? My security team is usually quite thorough." Reynolds maintained a neutral expression, despite his surprise at Warren's directness. "I came for my family. Drop the charges, let them go, and I'll resign from the FBI. Leave El Paso permanently." Warren laughed, the sound echoing off the hardwood floors. "That's a remarkably small request, given your situation. Did you know there are currently 7 arrest warrants for you in 3 counties? Evidence tampering, assaulting officers, even drug trafficking. All fabricated, just like the charges against my family. Of course they are, Warren agreed easily. But fabricated or not, they carry the full weight of the legal system. My legal system. Reynolds studied the man before him, searching for weakness. Why me, Warren? I wasn't even investigating you directly. My task force was focused on cartel operations across the border. And that's precisely the problem. Warren sipped his bourbon reflectively. You see, Deputy Director, El Paso thrives on a delicate balance. The cartels move their product. I ensure minimal interference. Everyone profits. The money builds schools, hospitals, infrastructure. I've transformed this city. Through drug money and corruption. Warren shrugged. Call it what you want. Your investigation threatened to disrupt everything I've built. Miller warned me about you. Said you couldn't be bought, couldn't be scared off. A rare quality these days. Reynolds took a calculated risk. Miller talked a lot before we sent him to federal prison. Gave us names, dates, operations. We know about the judicial appointments, the police captains you've purchased. We even know about your meetings with the Sinaloa cartel's representatives last year. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Warren's face, the first crack in his composed exterior. Miller doesn't know even half of my operation. I compartmentalize. You think he was the only one who talked? Reynolds pressed. Parker gave us even more. And Judge Harris is negotiating a plea deal as we speak. This was a bluff. Harris remained firmly in Warren's pocket, but the mayor's expression suggested the possibility hadn't occurred to him. Warren set down his glass, his demeanor shifting subtly. What exactly do you want, Reynolds? I told you. My family released. All charges dropped. And in return, I give you 24 hours to leave the country before I bring everything we have to the Attorney General. Enough evidence to put you away for the rest of your life. Warren studied Reynolds for a long moment, then laughed. You know, I almost believe you have something. Almost. He pressed a button beneath his desk. Unfortunately, I've built too much to walk away on the basis of a bluff. The study door opened, revealing 4 men in tactical gear, weapons ready. Not the same guards who had escorted Reynolds in. These were harder men, with the dead eyes of cartel enforcers. These gentlemen work for my business associates, Warren explained, standing. They'll ensure that whatever evidence you think you have never sees the light of day. Reynolds tensed, calculating his odds against 4 armed men in his injured state. Killing an FBI deputy director will bring down heat even you can't handle, Warren. Who said anything about killing? You're clearly unstable, grief-stricken over your family's legal troubles. When these men apprehend you breaking into my home, you'll be committed to a psychiatric facility, one where the doctors understand the importance of keeping certain patients sedated. The men advanced, weapons raised. Reynolds backed toward the windows, his injured body protesting each movement. That's the difference between us, Warren, Reynolds said, playing for time as he assessed escape routes. You think everyone has a price. Everyone can be corrupted or controlled. And you're living proof I'm right, Warren replied coldly. Look at you. Your career destroyed, your family imprisoned, your body broken. All because you wouldn't accept the reality of how the world works. A sudden explosion rocked the mansion, the sound coming from the front entrance. Then another, closer. Gunfire erupted somewhere in the distance. Warren's composed facade cracked completely. "What have you done?" Reynolds smiled for the first time. "I said I came alone. I never said I wasn't followed." Through the windows, tactical teams in FBI windbreakers swarmed the grounds. Chun had understood his plan all along, Reynolds as the distraction while she assembled a strike force to hit Warren when his attention was focused elsewhere. "It's over, Warren," Reynolds said as the mayor lunged for a desk drawer, presumably containing a weapon. Reynolds moved with surprising speed despite his injuries, tackling Warren before he could reach whatever he was grasping for. They crashed to the floor, Warren's superior weight momentarily giving him the advantage as he struck Reynolds' injured shoulder, sending waves of agony through his body. But Reynolds had been fighting through pain for weeks now. He rolled, using Warren's momentum against him, and pinned the older man with a knee to his chest. "Richard Warren," Reynolds gasped as FBI agents breached the study door. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, drug trafficking, and the attempted murder of a federal officer." As agents secured Warren, Chen entered, surveying the scene with satisfaction. "Backup arrived just in time, I see." Reynolds nodded, wincing as he rose to his feet. "Tell me you got it all." Chun held up her tablet, showing a video feed of their entire conversation. Every word. The wire in your sling transmitted perfectly. Warren's confession about the cartels, the corruption, all of it. For the first time in weeks, Reynolds allowed himself to feel something close to hope. "My family. A team's already at the detention center with release papers signed by a federal judge. They'll be free within the hour." As Warren was led away in handcuffs, the mayor locked eyes with Reynolds one final time. "This changes nothing," he hissed. "I still own this town. My people will continue." "Your people are being rounded up as we speak," Chen interrupted. "Federal agents are executing simultaneous warrants at the homes of 17 judges, police officials, and city council members. Your network is finished, Warren." Outside, news helicopters circled the mansion, filming as the mayor of El Paso was escorted to an FBI transport vehicle. The story would lead national broadcasts by morning, a corruption scandal reaching from street-level cops to the highest office in the city. Reynolds watched from a mansion's terrace, the desert wind cooling his face as the adrenaline of confrontation faded, leaving only exhaustion and relief in its wake. "We did it," Chen said, joining him at the railing. "Not yet," Reynolds replied, his thoughts already with Melissa and Jason. "Not until my family's safe." The battle was won, but Reynolds knew that the war against corruption never truly ended. There would always be another Warren, another Miller, ready to exploit power for personal gain. The only question was whether good people would continue to stand against them, regardless of the cost. "What do you think about Warren's downfall? Was justice served, or will corruption find new ways to thrive in El Paso?" Comment below with your thoughts and hit that like button if you're relieved to see this criminal mastermind finally facing justice. The FBI safe house outside Houston sat bathed in early morning sunshine, the temperature already climbing toward 85 degrees Fahrenheit despite the 7 a.m. hour. Reynolds stood on the porch, his injuries less painful after proper medical treatment, though the doctors warned his shoulder might never regain full mobility. On the television inside, news coverage of Warren's arrest played on a continuous loop. The mayor's corruption empire had collapsed spectacularly, with over 30 arrests in 3 counties. Judge Harris had flipped, providing evidence against his colleagues in exchange for leniency. Miller's conviction had been just the first domino in a cascade that was still toppling corrupt officials throughout Texas. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Reynolds found himself filled with a hollow anticipation as a black SUV turned into the long driveway, dust billowing behind its wheels. Chun joined him on the porch, coffee mug in hand. "They're here." Reynolds nodded, unable to find words for the mixture of emotions churning inside him. It had been 3 weeks since he'd seen Melissa and Jason, 3 weeks of hell that had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. The SUV stopped, and for a moment no one moved. Then the back door opened, and Jason emerged, taller somehow, or perhaps just older in a way that had nothing to do with height. His 12-year-old face was solemn, his eyes darting nervously across the property before settling on his father. Melissa followed, her usual immaculate appearance replaced by exhaustion. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She carried a single duffel bag. All they had left after their home had been ransacked by corrupt officers. Reynolds moved forward, his heart pounding. "Melissa. Jason. Jason ran to him, breaking protocol, ignoring the agent's instructions to proceed systematically. Reynolds caught his son in a one-armed embrace, his injured shoulder protesting, but his heart soaring. "Dad," Jason whispered, his voice muffled against Reynolds' chest. "They said you were a criminal. They showed us pictures of you attacking cops." "It was all fake," Reynolds assured him, looking over his son's head to Melissa, who remained standing by the SUV. "All of it." Jason pulled back, studying his father's face with an intensity no 12-year-old should possess. "I told them you wouldn't do that. I told them they were liars." Reynolds swallowed hard. "You were right." Melissa approached slowly, her expression unreadable. When she reached them, she placed a gentle hand on Jason's shoulder. "Go inside with Agent Chun, honey. Your father and I need to talk." Once Jason had reluctantly gone inside, the facade Melissa had maintained crumbled slightly. "They kept us in separate cells. Wouldn't let me see him except for 15 minutes a day. He had nightmares every night." "I'm so sorry," Reynolds began, reaching for her hand. She stepped back. "I know it wasn't your fault, David. I know you were doing your job. But—" She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "This isn't the first time your work has put us in danger. It's just the worst." Reynolds felt a cold dread forming in the pit of his stomach. "Melissa." "I can't do this anymore," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I can't live wondering if today's the day some criminal decides to come after you through us. I can't watch Jason grow up afraid of every police car, every stranger." She reached into her pocket and withdrew an envelope, holding it out to him. "I've been thinking about this for a long time, even before all this. What happened just made it clear I've been right all along." Reynolds didn't need to open the envelope to know what it contained. Divorce papers. The end of 15 years of marriage. The final casualty of Warren's vendetta. "We can work through this," he insisted, not taking the envelope. "I'll request a transfer, a desk job. Whatever it takes." Melissa shook her head, tears finally breaking free. "It wouldn't change who you are, David. You'll always be the man who runs toward danger, who can't look away when there's injustice. It's why I fell in love with you. And it's why I can't stay married to you." She placed the envelope on the porch railing. "Jason needs stability, safety, a life where SWAT teams don't break down our door in the middle of the night." Reynolds stood frozen, the victory over Warren suddenly meaningless compared to what he was losing. "I'm proud of you," Melissa said softly, touching his cheek one last time. "You brought down an entire corrupt system. You're a hero, David. But we need a father. A husband. Not a hero." She turned away, walking back toward the SUV where an agent waited to take them to her sister's home in Austin. Jason appeared in the doorway, confused, looking between his parents. "Mom, aren't we staying with Dad?" The question hung in the air, the final punctuation on a battle won and a war lost. What do you think about Melissa's decision? Is she right to protect their son, or should she have stayed to support Reynolds after everything he went through? Share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that like button if this emotional ending hit you hard. 1 month later, David Reynolds stood in his new office at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., unpacking the few personal items he brought from Texas. The promotion to Assistant Director of the Anti-Corruption Task Force had come as a direct result of the El Paso operation, a career advancement built on the ashes of his personal life. On television, the final chapter of the Warren saga was playing out. The former mayor had been sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. His network of corrupt officials had been dismantled, with new elections scheduled and federal oversight established to prevent similar systems from taking root again. Reynolds should have felt satisfaction. Instead, he felt the weight of victory's cost. His phone buzzed, a text from Melissa with a photo of Jason at his new school in Austin. They spoke weekly now, their conversations gradually becoming less strained, though the finalized divorce papers had arrived just yesterday. "You changed the system," Chin had told him during their final debriefing in Texas. "That's more than most people ever accomplish in a lifetime." But at what price? Reynolds wondered, looking at his son's smile in the photograph. The boy was healing, adapting to his new reality. Perhaps in time he would understand why his father had fought so hard, sacrificed so much. Reynolds' journey through 12 hours of hell had exposed corruption that had festered for years, bringing justice to a system that had forgotten its purpose. But it had also revealed hard truths about the cost of standing against powerful forces, how fighting for the greater good could hollow out the personal, leaving victories that felt empty despite their importance. The scars remained, physical ones from Miller's baton and Warren's hired guns, emotional ones from the choices forced upon him. His shoulder would never fully heal. The doctors were clear about that. A permanent reminder of the night that changed everything. Yet across El Paso, honest police officers could now do their jobs without fear of corrupt superiors. Judges could rule according to law rather than influence. Citizens could drive highways without worrying about predatory traffic stops based on the color of their skin. Small victories, important ones. Reynolds placed a framed photo of Jason on his new desk, a reminder of why the fight mattered, even when the personal cost was devastating. The system wasn't perfect. It might never be. But as long as people were willing to stand against corruption, to shine light into the darkness regardless of consequence, there was hope. "Sometimes justice demands sacrifice," Reynolds murmured to the empty office, "but it's still worth fighting for." The journey that began with flashing police lights on a desert highway had transformed into something larger than one man's ordeal, a reminder that the line between justice and injustice is maintained not by institutions, but by the people brave enough to defend it, even at personal cost. What do you think? Was Reynolds' sacrifice worth exposing the corruption in El Paso? Or is the price of justice sometimes too high? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe for more powerful stories of courage in the face of corruption. Remember, change begins when someone stands up and says enough. Thanks for joining us on this journey.